You know, there comes a point in life where the noise of everything just stops being enough. The parties, the career grind, the distractions, the dopamine hits from social media, the chaos of modern living. It's all like a fireworks show that dazzles you for a while, but eventually the sky goes dark again, and in that silence, a question rises from deep inside you, and it's terrifying in its simplicity. What is the point of all this? That question haunted me, man. I used to look around at the chaos of life, at how fast time was slipping by, and I kept asking myself why we're all here in the first place. Because if you think about it, we're floating on a rock in infinite space, circling around a giant fireball, in a universe we don't even understand. And the more you try to reason it out with pure logic, the crazier it gets. Science gives you incredible tools, no doubt, but it doesn't give you meaning. It can tell you how the stars are burning, but it doesn't tell you why you're here watching them burn. And that search for meaning, that deep ache for something real, it's not just philosophical, it's primal. Every culture, every civilization, every person at some point wrestles with that mystery. You can't drown it in money. You can't silence it with drugs. You can't outrun it by chasing the next achievement. Because at the end of the day, when you're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling in the dark, your soul keeps whispering, "Why are you alive? What's the purpose for me?" I tried to find it in all sorts of places. I read philosophy, ancient texts, stories of warriors, spiritual practices. I immersed myself in conversations with brilliant thinkers, psychologists, scientists, monks, and every time I thought I had a piece of the puzzle, I realized I was still missing the center. It was like staring at a half-finished painting. You could admire the detail, but you knew the picture wasn't whole. And then Islam entered my field of view. Now, I had heard about Islam before, of course, everybody has. But the version of Islam we're given in the West is often filtered through the lens of media, politics, and stereotypes. You hear about extremism, about rigid rules, about clashes with modernity. You don't really hear about it as a living spiritual path, a system designed to answer the question that haunts every human being: why are you alive? So at first I didn't take it seriously. I figured it was just another religion, just another belief system trying to control people. But curiosity is a powerful thing. I kept stumbling upon Muslim thinkers, scientists, artists, people who seemed centered in a way that felt different. They weren't lost in the chaos of ego. They had this calmness, this groundedness, and when I asked them where it came from, they would smile and say, "Islam." That word kept echoing in my mind, so I started digging. I opened the Quran not to convert, not to follow, just to understand. And man, the first thing that hit me was how different it was from what I expected. It wasn't just a book of rituals or commandments. It was a conversation, direct, powerful, unfiltered. It wasn't written like someone telling stories. It was like the creator of the universe was speaking to you. And the message was crystal clear. Life is not random. You are not an accident. You're here because God put you here, and your job isn't to just consume and chase pleasure. It's to recognize Him, to worship Him, to live with purpose, to prepare for something bigger after this life. That hit me like a freight train, because deep down, isn't that what we all feel? That there's something beyond the material. That this existence is more than just birth, struggle, and death. That gnawing emptiness inside us isn't depression, it's a hunger of the soul. And Islam doesn't just acknowledge it, it gives you the food to satisfy it, but of course I wasn't ready to accept that outright. I had too many questions. I had too much skepticism, too much ego. Could it really be that simple? Could it really be that the meaning of life is just submission? Just recognizing your place before God, That word, submission, used to bother me. It sounded weak, like giving up. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how backward my thinking was. Because what are we all really doing every day? We're submitting to something. Submitting to money, to success, to desires, to the opinions of other people, to the illusion of control. And all those masters we choose eventually betray us. Money slips away, fame disappears, desires fade, people forget you. But if you submit to the one who created everything, you're plugging into the only source that doesn't fade. And when that clicked, even just for a second, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, clarity, like fog lifting from a mountain view. Like the chaos quieted down for a moment, and the universe made sense. But that was just the beginning. Because the more I read, the more I realized Islam wasn't just philosophy. It was a complete way of life. It answered not only the big cosmic question, but also the everyday grind: how to live, how to eat, how to treat people, how to find balance. And I knew if I was going to really understand it, I had to go deeper. And that's where the real journey began. Because once you open that door, once you start exploring what Islam is really saying, it forces you to confront parts of yourself you've been avoiding. It challenges your ego, your habits, your excuses. And that's where my search for meaning collided with the reality of who I really was. And man, that collision was just the start of something I never expected. When I first started diving deeper into Islam, I thought it would be an intellectual journey. You know, read some books, analyze some verses, listen to scholars, connect the dots. But what I didn't realize was that Islam doesn't just sit in your head. It goes straight for your heart. And when it does, it shines a light on parts of you that you've been ignoring for years. That was the hardest part for me. Because once you start to understand what submission to God really means, you can't escape looking in the mirror and asking yourself, what am I really living for? And let me tell you, the ego hates that question. The ego wants to be the master. It wants to believe it's in control, that it's self-sufficient, that it doesn't answer to anyone. It feeds on pride, on success, on comparison. The ego wants to say, I am the center of my universe. But when you encounter Islam, you're confronted with the truth that you're not the center, you're a servant. And that flips everything upside down. At first, I resisted it. My mind started throwing up all the defenses. You don't need religion. You've got discipline. You've got achievements. You've built a life by your own hands. But in the quiet moments, when the noise of self-justification faded, I realized how fragile that argument was. Because if all I had built was taken away tomorrow, what would be left of me? If my success, my platform, my influence, all of it disappeared, would I still know who I am? That's when it hit me. I had been building my identity on sand, and Islam was pointing me toward rock. One of the first concepts that really cracked my armor was the idea of taqwa. In English, it's often translated as God, consciousness. It's this awareness that no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, God sees you, not in a paranoid, fearful sense, but in a grounding, liberating way. Like you're never truly alone, never lost in chaos, never meaningless. Every thought, every action, every breath is witnessed, and it all matters. When I really thought about that, it shattered my ego's illusions, because I realized how much of my life had been lived for people, for approval, for validation, for applause. But Islam said, no, live for God, because His approval is the only approval that lasts. And man, that's a heavy truth. Because once you internalize it, you can't keep living the same way. Suddenly, the late nights chasing dopamine hits feel hollow. The endless grind for recognition feels empty. Even the distractions you used to love start to lose their taste. Because deep down you know none of that is what you were created for. But here's the kicker: Islam doesn't just expose the ego, it gives you the tools to tame it. Prayer, fasting, charity, reflection, these aren't just rituals. They're workouts for the soul. They're ways of breaking the chains of the ego and reminding yourself of your true place in the universe. The 5 daily prayers, for example, at first glance it seems excessive. 5 times a day, really? But then I thought about how distracted we are as human beings, how often we drift, get caught up in nonsense, forget what matters. The prayers are like checkpoints, pulling you back, reminding you again and again, hey, remember why you're here, remember who you belong to. And when you bow down in prostration, forehead to the ground, it's not humiliation, it's liberation, because in that moment, the ego shuts up. It has no choice. You're face down before the Creator, and suddenly, the stress of pretending to be in control melts away. And then there's fasting. Man, that one really struck me. Because when you fast, you're saying to your body, you're not in charge. You deny yourself food, water, pleasure, not because those things are bad, but because you're training the soul to lead instead of the stomach. It's like you're rewiring your entire system to remember that discipline, patience, and gratitude are the real sources of strength. And charity, it's genius because nothing kills ego like giving away what you love. Money is the ultimate symbol of control, and when you hand it over to someone in need, you're breaking the illusion of ownership. You're saying, this isn't mine anyway. It's God's gift, and I'm just passing it along. That shift is huge. But the real battle wasn't just practicing these things. It was fighting the resistance inside me. The ego doesn't go down without a fight. It whispers in your ear, you're too busy for prayer, you're too tired for fasting, you've earned your money, don't give it away. This is all outdated, unnecessary, extreme. And every time you push back against that voice, it feels like a mini war. What surprised me most, though, was the peace that came on the other side of those battles. The more I resisted my ego, the lighter I felt. Like I had been carrying invisible chains for years, and they were finally snapping off one by one. And that's when I realized something profound. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want. Freedom is breaking free from the things that control you. And Islam was giving me that freedom, not by inflating my ego, but by humbling it. That shift in perspective was massive. But it also raised bigger questions. If this was true, if Islam really had the tools to tame the ego and uncover the meaning of life, then what else was I missing? What other wisdom was buried in this tradition I had overlooked? And that curiosity pulled me even deeper. It made me want to understand not just the practices, but the worldview, the story of where we came from, where we're going, and what this life is really about. And that's where the teachings about creation, death, and the afterlife hit me like a storm. Because Islam doesn't leave those questions vague, it gives you answers. Answers that are as terrifying as they are liberating. The deeper I went into Islam, the more I realized it wasn't just about rules, rituals, or even taming the ego. It was about framing life itself within a story that stretched from before the beginning of time to eternity after death. And once you start to see yourself inside that story, everything changes. Most of us live like this life is all there is. We wake up, grind, eat, sleep, chase experiences, maybe find some meaning in relationships or work, and then one day, boom, you're gone. That's how our culture treats life, a short flicker in an endless void. But Islam says no, you were created with purpose, and you are heading somewhere. This life is not the destination, it's the test. That's a radical shift. The Quran lays it out straight. Before any of us were even born, our souls existed. There was a moment outside of time where God created all of us and asked one simple question: Am I not your Lord? And every soul, every single one, responded, Yes, you are. That moment, that covenant, is buried deep in our being. And that's why, no matter who you are, no matter where you're from, you have that instinct that there's something greater. It's not conditioning, it's not culture, it's memory. A memory of standing before your Creator and acknowledging the truth. That alone blew my mind, because it explained something I had always felt but couldn't put into words. That innate pull toward meaning, that restlessness that no pleasure could satisfy. Islam says it's because your soul already knows the truth. You're just trying to remember it. Then comes this life. 70, 80, maybe 90 years if you're lucky, and in the grand scheme of eternity, that's nothing. A blink, a single breath, but within that blink, everything is decided. This life is your test, not in the sense of a cruel trick, but like an opportunity. Every choice, every action, every moment, it's all shaping your eternal destiny, and here's where it gets real: death. We avoid thinking about it in modern culture. We push it aside, sanitize it, distract ourselves from it. But it's the one guarantee every single one of us has: death is coming. The Quran doesn't sugarcoat it. It says every soul shall taste death, not maybe, not probably, absolutely, and when it comes there are no negotiations, no delays. That line, taste death, really stuck with me because it doesn't say experience death, like some abstract event. It says taste, personal, direct, inescapable, and Islam describes that moment vividly. For the believer, death is like the gentle pulling of a hair from butter. The soul leaves the body peacefully, carried by angels into a realm of light. For the one who rejected truth, it's like ripping a thorny branch through wet wool, painful, tearing, terrifying. And the thing is, you don't get to choose in that moment which category you fall into. Your whole life up to that point is the choice. And then comes the afterlife. Now, I'll be real, when I first read about heaven and hell in the Quran, I thought it sounded symbolic, maybe metaphorical. But the more I studied, the more I realized Islam speaks about them as real, literal destinations. Gardens beneath which rivers flow, unimaginable beauty, eternal peace on one side. And, on the other, fire, regret, loss, separation from God. And what hit me hardest was this: heaven and hell aren't arbitrary rewards or punishments. They're the natural result of what you chose to live for. Think about it. If your whole life you pursued selfishness, arrogance, cruelty, why would you suddenly enjoy paradise, a place built on humility, love, and gratitude? It wouldn't even make sense. And if your life was built on worship, compassion, and truth, why would you be sent to a place of torment? You end up where you belong, your choices carve your eternity, and then I learned about the day of judgment. The Quran paints this picture of a world where everything we know dissolves. The mountains crumble, the seas boil, the sky is torn apart. Humanity rises from the grave, billions upon billions, standing before their Creator, and every deed is laid bare. Not just the big ones, but the small ones too. The moments you thought no one saw, the whispers in your heart, the late night decisions, everything is recorded. That image shook me to my core because it meant accountability is absolute. You can fool people, you can even fool yourself, but you can't fool God. And yet, in the midst of that terrifying reality, there was also incredible hope. Because Islam says God is Al-Rahman, Al-Rahim, the most merciful, the most compassionate. His mercy outweighs his wrath. A single tear of sincere repentance can erase a mountain of sins. A single act of kindness can tip the scales on Judgment Day. That balance between justice and mercy is unlike anything I had encountered before. It wasn't the cold indifference of nihilism, nor the blind forgiveness of everything goes. It was truth and love perfectly woven together. All of this forced me to look at my own life differently. Suddenly, every moment mattered. The way I treated people, the way I spoke, the way I used my time, it all carried eternal weight. The random Tuesday morning wasn't random anymore. The little habits I dismissed as meaningless. They were shaping my soul for eternity. And that's when I understood why Islam calls this life a test. Because it's not about perfection, it's about direction. Are you walking toward God or away from Him? That's the only question that matters. The more I reflected on that, the more I felt the fragility of my own existence. I realized how much time I had wasted chasing things that didn't matter: fame, pleasure, comfort, things that vanish in an instant. And meanwhile, the real treasure, the eternal treasure, was being ignored. And that's where a sense of urgency started to grow inside me. Because knowing all this wasn't enough, if this was real, if life, death, and the afterlife were as Islam described, then what was I going to do about it? And that question pushed me into the next stage of my journey, because it wasn't just about discovering truth anymore, it was about living it. And that's where the real challenge began. Once I reached that point, once I understood the reality of creation, death, and the afterlife, I couldn't just sit on the sidelines anymore, because knowing the truth without living it is like being handed a map out of the desert and then refusing to walk. And that realization was terrifying. Up until then, I had treated Islam like an idea, a philosophy, something to think about, something to debate. But Islam isn't meant to be a theory, it's meant to be lived. And that's where the real weight came crashing down on me. Because living it meant change, it meant discipline, it meant breaking habits, building new ones, and aligning my life with something bigger than myself. And let me tell you, that is not easy. The first struggle was prayer. 5 times a day, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. At first, it felt impossible. I was used to structuring life around my schedule, my work, my convenience. But prayer flipped that upside down. It wasn't "I'll pray when I have time." It was "everything else moves around prayer." That was hard. But it was also freeing, because for the first time in my life, my days weren't ruled by chaos, they were anchored by purpose. Morning, noon, afternoon, evening, night. Each prayer was like a breath, a reset button that pulled me back to what really mattered. Then came the lifestyle changes, and man, that was a battle. Islam isn't just about the big spiritual truth. It's about the everyday details. What you eat, how you speak, how you treat people, how you make money, how you spend it. It covers everything. And at first that felt overwhelming, like I was being boxed in. But then I realized it was the opposite. It was structure. It was a framework designed to protect me from my own self-destructive impulses. Take diet, for example. No pork, no alcohol. For a culture that glorifies indulgence, that seems extreme. But when I thought about it, it made perfect sense. How many lives have been wrecked by alcohol alone? How many families destroyed? How many regrets piled up because of one night of intoxication? Islam said, cut it out, live clear, live clean, and suddenly it wasn't restriction, it was protection. Or take speech. Islam emphasizes truth, kindness, avoiding gossip, avoiding lies. That seems simple, but when you actually try to live it, you realize how much of our daily conversation is wasted on negativity, on ego, on tearing others down. It forced me to think before speaking, to be intentional, to use words as tools of healing instead of weapons of pride. And then there was money. Islam makes it clear your wealth is a trust, it's not really yours. You're just a caretaker, and part of that trust is giving back. Through zakat, through charity, through generosity. And I'll be honest, at first, giving away what I had worked for stung. But then I saw the faces of people who received it, the relief, the gratitude. And I realized that in giving, I was actually the one gaining. My ego shrank, my heart expanded, but the hardest part wasn't the external changes. It was the internal battles. The temptations, the whispers, the constant pull of the world. Islam has a word for this struggle, jihad al-nafs, the struggle against the self. And it's real. Every day I was wrestling with laziness, pride, anger, desire. Some days I won, some days I failed. And those failures cut deep because once you know the truth, sin isn't fun anymore. It's heavy, it feels like poison. But here's the beauty: Islam doesn't expect perfection, it expects effort. It says the most beloved people to God aren't the flawless ones. They're the ones who stumble, repent, and keep getting back up. That was huge for me because it meant I didn't have to carry the weight of being perfect. I just had to be sincere, keep striving, keep turning back. And in that process, something incredible started happening. My heart changed, my perspective shifted. The things that used to stress me out, money, status, recognition, they lost their grip. I started to see life through a different lens. The little annoyances that used to trigger me didn't matter anymore. The bigger picture was too clear. I also started noticing a new kind of peace. It wasn't the temporary high of success or the fleeting calm after meditation. It was deeper, steadier, like a river flowing under the surface of everything. It came from knowing I was aligned with something eternal, that I wasn't just drifting anymore. I was anchored. But that peace didn't mean life got easy. In fact, in some ways, it got harder. Because once you start living for truth, the world pushes back. People question you, criticize you, mock you. They don't understand why you're changing. Some even see it as a threat, like your commitment to faith is a judgment on their lifestyle. That was tough, because I had to learn how to stand firm without arrogance, how to live my values without shoving them down others' throats. And then there was the struggle of consistency. It's one thing to get inspired, to have those moments of clarity where everything feels obvious. But it's another thing to wake up every day and keep walking the path, especially when the fire fades. That's when discipline matters. That's when the habits of prayer, fasting, reflection, they keep you going, even when the heart feels heavy. Through all of this, I started to see a pattern. Islam wasn't just giving me answers, it was transforming me. It wasn't just telling me what the meaning of life was. It was reshaping how I lived, how I thought, how I felt. And that transformation wasn't just about me, it was spilling over into everything: my relationships, my work, my outlook on the world. And that's when I realized something crucial. Islam isn't just about the individual, it's about community. Because faith lived in isolation is fragile, but faith lived with others, supported by others, strengthened by others, that's unshakable. And it was in discovering the power of community that my journey took its next, unexpected turn. By the time I had started living the practices of Islam, I realized something was still missing. The personal transformation was real. My ego was softening, my habits were shifting, my heart was changing. But there was another dimension I hadn't yet tapped into. And that was community, because here's the truth: no human being was meant to walk this path alone. We're social creatures, wired for connection, for belonging. And Islam doesn't just acknowledge that, it builds it into the foundation of faith. I saw this first in prayer. When you stand shoulder to shoulder with others in the mosque, all facing the same direction, all bowing and prostrating at the same time, something happens. The barriers dissolve. It doesn't matter if the person next to you is rich or poor, black or white, young or old. In that moment, you're equals united in worship, submitting together before the Creator, and it's powerful. Because in a world obsessed with division and hierarchy, Islam says, before God, you are the same. That sense of unity extends beyond the mosque. The entire system of Islam is designed around community. Zakat ensures that the wealthy take care of the poor. Ramadan isn't just about personal discipline, it's about sharing meals, breaking fast together, remembering those who struggle. Even the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, is the ultimate expression of global unity. Millions of people from every corner of the earth, dressed the same, moving in the same rhythm, declaring the same words. It's a living reminder that you are part of something so much bigger than yourself. And I realized that community wasn't just a bonus, it was essential. Because faith is fragile when it's isolated, the world is full of distractions, temptations, struggles. But when you're surrounded by others who are striving for the same truth, it strengthens you. Their presence pulls you up when you're weak. Their reminders keep you focused. Their stories inspire you. And in return, you do the same for them. It's like a chain, each link connected, each link holding the others together. That's when the meaning of life started to crystallize for me in a way I had never seen before. Because it wasn't just about me finding peace, or me taming my ego, or me preparing for the afterlife. It was about serving something greater. It was about being part of a movement, a community, a family that spans continents and centuries, all anchored by the same truth, that there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his messenger. And here's what's wild: once that clicked, everything else fell into place. The meaning of life isn't hidden in some abstract puzzle or buried in philosophy books. It's right in front of us: to know God, to worship Him, to serve His creation, and to prepare for the eternal life that follows this temporary one. That's it. Simple but profound. And Islam doesn't just tell you that. It gives you the tools, the discipline, the community to actually live it. The more I lived it, the more I realized how much it answered the deepest cries of the human soul, that emptiness I used to feel. Gone, that gnawing sense that life was slipping through my fingers without meaning, replaced by clarity. That fear of death, transformed into anticipation, not because I was perfect, but because I knew that if I kept striving, God's mercy would meet me on the other side. And here's something I never expected. Islam didn't make me less curious about life. It made me more curious. It didn't shrink my world, it expanded it. Because when you believe in God, when you believe this universe was created with purpose, suddenly everything becomes a sign. The stars, the oceans, the mountains, the human mind, it all points back to Him. Every scientific discovery becomes a deeper appreciation of His design. Every act of kindness becomes an act of worship. Every breath becomes a gift, and the best part, that clarity doesn't end with you. It radiates outward. When you live with purpose, people notice. They see the peace, the discipline, the compassion, and they start asking questions. And in those questions, the ripple effect begins. Because the meaning of life isn't just something you discover for yourself. It's something you share through how you live, through how you treat others, through how you embody the truth you've been given. So when I look back at my journey, at the restless searching, the ego battles, the confrontations with mortality, the struggles to live with discipline, and the discovery of community, I realize it was all leading here to this understanding: we are not accidents, we are not meaningless, we are souls on a journey. Life is a test, death is a passage, and eternity is the destination. And the meaning of it all is simple: Submit to the one who created you, live with purpose, serve others, and prepare for the meeting with your Lord. And once you know that really know it, everything else falls into place. That's the meaning of life. That's what I discovered through Islam, and it changed me forever.